weed control and herbicide demonstration results. And to kind of kick us off, we're going to have Kenny Simon come up and talk about weed control, starting with good grass. In terms of a quick speaker biography, Kenny Simon is our Forage's instructor, and he started his extension year in the fall of 2001. He has been a county agent, a program associate, and is now our current Forage instructor. He is one of the primary leaders of the 300-day grazing program in Arkansas at this point. And in addition to his professional career, he has a cow-calf operation here in Faulkner County. So thank you so much for agreeing to speak for us today. And please take it away, Kenny. Thank you so much.
All right. I appreciate the introduction. It's a real pleasure to be able to be here today. And for those of y'all that are in the back, if y'all don't mind, go ahead and move up here to these seats in the front, please. But what I'm going to talk about today, a lot of times when we're talking about weed control, a lot of times it's you're calling us with questions about, well, I've got this weed in my pasture. What do I do now to control it? Well, when when that weed is present, and we're making a herbicide recommendation on how to control it, that's a reactive approach. And what I want to kind of talk about today is a little bit more of how do we take a proactive approach? Instead of controlling them weeds after they're there, what's some forage practices that we can do to try to prevent those undesirable weeds in the first place? And so, and as we go through this, keep in mind that the weeds are a plant out of place. Okay, so you may think of, well, is curly dock a weed? Well, Stan, is curly dock a weed? So Stan says no. Well, when that plant is young and vegetative, it's palatable. The cattle will come through there and eat it. And a lot of our broadleaf weeds and stuff, when they're young, tender, in the vegetative state, they're going to eat them. But it's when those plants get bigger and mature and produce seed heads, the palatability and stuff may change. So some basic things that we're going to talk about. And as we go through this, the main thing to keep in mind is what we're trying to do here is minimize the bare ground. We're trying to provide canopy coverage from a desirable grass and minimize the amount of bare ground. Okay, well, that sounds like a fairly simple approach to doing that. And it is, but what will happen is if we start neglecting things, if fertilizer prices are high this year, I'm going to skip that. And well, 3 or 4 years down the road, your forage composition may change, and you wake up and go out there one morning and, hey, where did all these undesirables come from? So some of the basic things that we're going to talk about, and a lot of this stuff is just going to be a reminder and refresher. When we're talking about weed control, it's an integrated approach, and it's an approach that we need to be taking that you're going to have to apply all of these. So if we go out there and just improve soil fertility alone may not control all of our weeds. So it's a combination of the soil fertility management, our stubble height management, making sure that we're leaving a little bit of grass out there, making sure that there's desirable forages out there to begin with. And then if there's not those desirable forages, what are some options to fill in? And then when we have some breakthroughs, that's when we come in with the herbicides and try to control them. So, when we start with, this is one of the basic practices that we do anytime that we go out on a farm visit and trying to make recommendations of, hey, Kenny, I've got this field, come out here and look at it with me and make a recommendation. Well, what we've got to do is we've got to take an assessment of it. We got to know what's out there, what we're working with, and then be able to turn the management decision. And so we do that by conducting a forage inventory. Now, these forage inventories can be as simple as like what we're seeing here on the screen, where you could just do 4 categories: grass, clover, weed, bare ground. Or if you wanted to get more elaborate and you're really good at plant identification, like Dr. Kubesh, we have a forage inventory sheet that you could go through there, and it breaks it down by category: warm season grasses, cool season grasses. And, and the better job that you can do of inventorying, the better the management practices, we can really fine tune it. But this right here will give you the snapshot of where you need to be in. And again, the whole goal with this is trying to maximize the amount of of desirable grasses, legumes in the field, and minimize those undesirable broadleaf weeds and minimizing the amount of bare ground. And so, and when we take that inventory, you can take that inventory and we kind of put it into three categories. And this was some categories that that Dr. Jennings has defined for us several years ago when we was dealing with the flood damage and stuff on our pastures, and we dealing with severe drought. He kind of broke it down into three categories. You've got fully functional, moderately functional, or partially functional. And so when you're in that category, you know, the more desirable grass that's out there, the more quickly that we can get that desirable grass to fit in. So if you're in a fully functional or even a moderately functional, if you're at a moderately functional stand at the beginning of the season with some appropriate management practices, you should be able to get that stand to fill in by the end of the season. It's when we get into these stands that have diminished and they're down here in the partially functional category, it's those that get hard to do with. You know, you may have a partially functional stand and you've got some Bermuda grass out there, but do you really have enough to justify fertilizing it? And we'll talk a little bit about that as we go on. So the next step, you know, soil fertility management. This is very basic. You know what we all need to be doing. Dr. Rivera talked about any time that he's trying to balance a ration and come up with a supplemental feed, he wants a hay test to look at, know what the majority of their diet is, and then how do we supplement it to meet the needs of the cattle. Well, the soil testing's the same way. And I mean, that's going to be one of the most common answers that you can get if you come to us with a question about how to better manage your field. Is we're going to ask you, well, do you have a soil test? Look at that soil test, and that is a guide. That is a guide to how you're gonna best spend your money when you need to fertilize it. And you know, and go ahead and take the time to sample your whole place. You know, take the time to sample your whole place. You don't have to lime everything at once. You don't have to put out all the pig and cake fertilizer that it requires at once. But when you do fertilize, you'll know what you need to fertilize with and what's the best way to spend your money. You know, when we talk about the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, you know, everybody knows, you know, nitrogen is critical. Nitrogen is what makes grass grow. And so anytime that you're submitting a sample, the nitrogen rates on Bermuda grass production is a set rate. If you're putting up Bermuda grass hay production, our recommendation is 50 pounds of nitrogen per ton of Bermuda grass. And then, so regardless if you're producing 1 ton or 4 tons, it's that 50-pound increments. That's going to stay consistent. And a lot of people are pretty good about applying nitrogen. But where we get into some real issues at is with our potassium levels. And so, and especially in our hay fields, that if you're looking at the nutrient removal, if you're looking at nutrient removal rates, your nitrogen and your potassium levels are a 1-to-1. For every pound of nitrogen you're removing a pound of potassium. And over time, these potassium levels can get depleted very quickly. Our phosphorus levels only takes about a third of that. And so our phosphorus levels are usually pretty good, but pay really close attention to your potassium levels. You know, and then when we do put out our nitrogen fertilizer, make sure with that nitrogen fertilizer, your target forage needs to be actively growing at that time. Okay, so if you've got a field of fescue and you say, hey, we've gotten some rain this week, I think I'm going to go out and put out some nitrogen fertilizer on my fescue. Well, you're past the growing season for fescue. You know, if we're going to stockpile our Bermuda grass or stockpile fescue, we've got defined windows that we're going to do that in. So make sure, you know, with this nitrogen fertilizer that you're putting it out during a period of the time that forage is actively growing. You know, and a big one, most of this gets followed pretty close. But the big one that people jump the gun on is when we're in the spring of the year and we've got some days in March that we warm up to 60 degrees. And at 60 degrees, our Bermuda grass is going to start to green up and everybody's getting tired of feeding hay. Cows are tired of eating the hay. Hey, I'm going to throw out some fertilizer and get this jump started. Well, with Bermuda grass, we got to pay attention to our nighttime temperatures. and we need nighttime temperatures at 60 degrees for a week for 5 to 7 days solid before that Bermuda grass is really actively growing. And so just be mindful of this at the time of the year that you're applying. Stubble height management. This is the old saying is, it takes leaves to grow leaves. So the more leaf area that you leave out there, the quicker that grass is going to recover. And we've got your warm season grass like Bermuda grass, for example. Bermuda grass is going to recover from its rhizomes and stolons. It can tolerate close grazing, but if you leave a little bit of forage out there, it will regrow and recover much quicker than it will if you graze it down short. Now with fescue of course is a cool season perennial. It's going to survive from the crowns and from seed production. So with fescue, if you deplete those fescue crowns down to really short, and we go into a droughty period into the summer, that fescue may not recover until the fall. And I think that's where we're seeing some real changes in our forage composition is maybe due to the cutting heights or even grazing heights that we're doing on some of these. And just to give you a little bit of an illustration, this is work that was done at the University of Kentucky, and they looked at fescue being cut once a week down to 1 inch, so like a continuous grazing setting would be, or they left it at 3.5 inches and cut it once a month. Okay, so here's day one, what they initially cut the heights to, and then look by day three. Day three, that grass that was cut to 1 inch, you can't hardly see that there was a change. But look how much just in 1 week or just in 3 days, by leaving some leaf area out there, how much more leaf recovered in that time. And then look by day 6. They've both doubled in height, but you're now went on the continuous grazing. You're 1 inch, so you now got 2 inches. So you're just starting to get some leaf area back. But that you left some stubble height out there, we're probably at 6 to 7 inches at this point. These plants are really, they're going to capture a lot of nutrients, a lot of sunlight, and they're going to be able to keep growing really fast. One of the things that we've started this year, and this is a project that we're working with several of the county agents on here in central Arkansas, is we're doing a cutting height trial. And what we're looking at on this cutting height trial, this is a Bermuda grass field that we're cutting at different heights. So we're cutting it at 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch, and 4 inch, cutting it at different heights, and we're looking at how those changes in cutting heights, how that may affect your total yield for the season, how it may affect your forage quality, and even your forage composition. This is something that we've just wrapped up this for the season. So we cut this. We took 4 harvests off of it for the year. So the first 3 harvests, we took our first harvest, and then our second and third harvest was cut on a 30-day intervals, just like we would for a hay harvest. And then at that end of the season growth in August, we let that grow to stockpile. We're going to continue this for a couple years. We've taken the forage assessment at the start, and we're monitoring it throughout. But I really think that we're going to see some big changes, some big differences by year 3 in our forage composition. I think those areas that we're leaving some stubble height, that Bermuda grass is going to keep getting thicker and thicker, and when it does, we're going to be able to choke out some foxtail and some of the other things. So as we switch gears, kind of the last thought of the presentation, it goes into, okay, so this partially functional stand, maybe it's a field that has been neglected. Maybe you're trying to reclaim it, you're taking it over, and it doesn't have that real nice solid stand of grass out there. Well, so there is some options for annuals that we could put in, and if you're in a situation where it's primarily a warm season based grass out there, so it's something like it's Bermuda grass, Dallas grass, Bahia grass, even crabgrass, those warm season grasses, and you're looking for an annual that's going to complement that. And so with annuals, the big thing we want to do, we want to use that to complement the system. So in other words, if you've got a warm season system, So you've got Bermuda grass out there and you put crabgrass with it. Well, the crabgrass may change some of the nutritional value and may change some animal performance, but you're not shifting your number of grazing days. And so in this case, what we're trying to do is keep something green and growing more months of the year, and trying to keep something actively growing out there. And so if we do have this warm season base, ryegrass works very good as a competitor to choke everything else out. You know, if you get a really nice stand of ryegrass like what we're seeing in the picture, and you can manage this so that you're doing some controlled grazing, so you're turning on, you know, when it's 8 to 10 inches tall and you're pulling off of it at 4 inches, it's hard for any other grasses to compete in that. And so it works very good as a weed control method. You know, summer annuals are the same thing. You know, so this would be more for maybe more of a system that is a cool season base. But you know, if you've got some fescue stands that have really stand out a lot over the years, or maybe you're in the process, Mitch, you're wanting to renovate some of these. You know, our summer annuals like sorghum Sudan can make a very good smother crop. And when you get stands as thick as what we're seeing here in this picture, it's hard for any other thing to grow in that. And so, you know, these annuals can be a very good form of weed control. You know, and as I wrap it up here, you know, as a lot of us are going to be feeding hay within the next few weeks or month or whatever, and we're going to, you know, whether you're feeding in hay rings or you're unrolling the hay, at some point we're going to get really wet weather, and you're going to have some soil disturbance. If you take those hay feeding areas and you will seed them with a desirable forage, so whether that's a crabgrass, whether it's clovers, maybe it's ryegrass, try to use that opportunity, that growing media there that's got all those rich nutrients, use that as an opportunity to plant something desirable, and that'll help to choke out some of the pigweed that may be coming in. So, you know, as we wrap up here the presentation, just keep in mind the main thing we're wanting to do is keep ground cover. Trying to make sure that we're maintaining 3 to 4 inches of desirable forage growth out there. You know, and in the spring of the year, that's pretty easy to do when grass is growing really fast. But where we run into issues is when we get in the summer months, and like Larry was describing earlier, you know, what was it, Larry? 4 months of below average rainfalls. Well, our pastures get short, and our mindset goes to, well, if when I run out of grass, I'm just going to open all the gates and let them go. Well, that's the exact opposite of what we need to be doing. You know, the grazing management is going to be more important during periods of time of limited forage production than it is when we have ample forage production. We need to, you know, when you get to these prolonged droughts, you know, and you've ran out of grass, nothing's regrowing, confine those cattle to one field and start feeding hay and let everything else rest. And those fields that are resting and recovering, they're going to come out of that drought much quicker than what they would if you leave the gates wide open. But, and so with that said, I'll open it up for any questions. For those of you that use Facebook a lot, we've got a new Facebook page, Arkansas Extension Forages, that we try to keep active posts on. So every Friday we're going to put out a new post, and then as we have timely events, or you know, the issues that we may be seeing with the frost, such as prussic acid with Johnson grass, we're going to try to keep some timely topics and stuff posted on that. So,
all right, thank you for that presentation, Kenny. At this point, we've got time for one, maybe two questions. Do I see a hand? Uh-oh.
I just want to ask you about those use areas around the feeders things. Is that compaction there enough problem that you might need to disc that, harrow it, or drag it or something? Or can you just throw the seed in?
So the question is pertaining to, you know, when you get areas like this, if you're going to be feeding in a ring, you've got that area around the ring that really concentrated the animals on. How much compaction and stuff do you get out of that, you know? So if I was in a situation that I needed to seed my fields, and so To me, I like using rings. A lot of people unroll, and unroll is a great method for feeding hay. But my schedule works better for feeding in rings. I can put out enough for 2 or 3 days. What I'm going to do when I'm feeding rings is I'm going to try to feed them in straight lines. I'm going to feed them in straight lines across the width of the field, so that at the end of the hay feeding, I can go in there with whether a disc or drag, and I can slick those areas up, smooth them back over, and then get ready to plant. So Larry, what I do on ours is I drag them. We've got a 10-foot kilfer blade that we drag the fields off and smooth them up.
All right, we got time for one more quick question.
What you were talking about, fertilizer timing, how would that change? How do you deal with it on litter? Now you got to change your timing a little bit.
Well, the topic of commercial fertilizer versus litter, that's something that, the benefit of the commercial fertilizer is you can go buy it on a guaranteed analysis, and you can go get it when you need it. Whereas with litter, when I get litter, I've got to coordinate with a third party that they've got to get the litter and then haul it to me. So it's not always being put out at the most ideal time. But the phosphorus, potassium in it are stable, so you can put them out at any time. But that nitrogen, it goes back to just like nitrogen in commercial fertilizer. You need to put it out when that forage is actively growing. And I know in litter we don't always get that opportunity. You kind of put out litter when you can get access to it. But the P and K is fairly stable in the soil. You can put that out at any time. But your nitrogen, if you're not putting it out during the actively growing season, that nitrogen's going to dissipate and volatilize off. Matt, we're out of time.
In the interest of trying to keep things on schedule, we got a hard stop at noon. Thank you, Kenny. We're going to move on to our next speaker, Mr. Mike Andrews. Mike has worked in cooperative extension for over 37 years, 4 counties across the state. He has worked primarily with livestock and forage producers to improve their programs, and he has trained over 40 grassland evaluation teams for both 4-H and FFA. And just for reference, that's where we do a lot of our training for a lot of our future high school, middle school, even some elementary school kids with how to better manage pastures and hayfields. Mike has a cow-calf operation where he implements extension recommendations and experiments with herbicides to find ways to control hard-to-kill weeds and weeds with present issues to find a means to control and not damage forages. So Mike's presentation is going to be talking about some of those hard-to-kill weeds. So, Mike, take it away.
Okay. Let them load it up. Sometimes we have weeds that are very easy to kill, but we have a hard way to do it. Seed Bermuda and let the crabgrass and everything come up, then try to figure out what you're going to do. So we can prevent all those problems if we start in February, March, getting ground ready, spray it with Roundup 2 or 3 times to take out that competition. Crabgrass, barnyard grass, some of those are real easy to kill, but when you got Bermuda grass that tall, it's very hard to kill. So not necessarily hard to kill weeds, but weeds that present problems. I start out here talking about herbicides, and the first thing I've got up here is ammonium sulfate, which is a fertilizer. For this particular one is a spray grade ammonium sulfate, and I work at a lot of row crops also, and we started doing some water testing, and we have some pretty hard water, high pH water, with a lot of positive ion elements in it, and we use a lot of AMS in the row crop, so I got to looking at it for our forages. So about a 50-pound bag is about $32 now, so that's about 60. I use a pound per acre, about 60 cents an acre, and I think it makes our herbicides work a whole lot better. I do have this publication Dr. Kubesh has got. It's from Purdue, and it talks about using the AMS in our spray water. There's about 6 different nutrients that we want to test for, and at the Arkansas Water Quality Lab, it'll cost you $60 to test for these nutrients. And in this publication, there's a formula that you can take your results, put in an equation, and figure out how much AMS you need per acre. We put as much as 17 pounds of the AMS in 100 gallons of water in some of the row crop spray solutions. But normally, about a pound or 2 per acre in our forages for most waters will get you a pretty good spray deal. A lot of our chemicals are negatively charged, and when we put it in this water with all of the positive ions, the chemical and those elements bind together and makes the chemical pretty much useless to control weeds. So we can increase our control considerably by putting the AMS in prior to putting the chemicals in, where they bind with these nutrients and take them out of solution. A lot of chemistry, more than I really know, but I know it works. Greenbrier control. How many of you can go out and kill greenbriers pretty easy? One of the hardest weeds we've got, and I've got a caliper blade and a roller. 2 very valuable elements of greenbrier control, in my opinion. Back 7-8 years ago, I was spraying some Grassland in Remedy, 2% and 0.5% solution. And where the tractor tires ran, I was killing 90% or more of the greenbriers where the tractor tires ran. So I got to thinking, rolling them things over is helping control them. So I started turning my bucket up on the tractor and pushing them over, and that also helped. We've done some demos or field work where we took and rolled greenbriers down and left standing and sprayed, and there's the 90% or better where the tractor tires were running. Either using a caliper blade or a roller to lay those greenbrier over, we were probably getting 75% control of greenbrier with, again, it was 2% Grassland, 0.5% Remedy, 15, 18 gallons of water per acre. And we started adding the AMS, and we were increasing that by 5 to 10% control on the greenbriers. So we were getting 80, 85% control of greenbriers by going in and rolling, adding AMS to the spray solution, and that's pretty good control. I don't know how many of you have greenbrier problems, but that was a big help in our area up in northeast Arkansas because we have considerable amounts of greenbrier. Would recommend not bush hogging the greenbriers the prior year that you're going to spray. And we usually do this late April, early May. So that's the timing on it before the leaves really get really waxed over. And I've talked to Dr. Boyd, that used to be our weed specialist, several times, and he's thinking that we're getting more chemical on the stems and maybe on the underneath side of the leaves of your greenbrier where it's not as waxy. So there's a picture of greenbrier. So I did a demo this time, and I'll show more results here in a minute, but there was some greenbrier in the Patriot strip that I sprayed. And I don't know if you can see the maroon colored, yellow colored leaves. Those are greenbrier. And at 1 ounce per acre rate of Patriot, getting fairly, I think we're going to get pretty good control. So might be a new option. Not rolled down, no AMS in the spray solution. So I'm excited that maybe 1 ounce of Patriot might control greenbrier. Does anybody know why I'm excited about that? $4 an acre. $4 an acre. I think this is one of the underused chemicals that we've got that we can use in half ounce, $2 an acre, and take care of a lot of broadleaf weeds in warm season grasses. Matt Sulfuron, yes, sir. I know this is maybe a picture that you may not be able to see real good, but this is a 10-foot strip through the middle of most of these pictures that I'm going to show, except the spray demo, were on a farm that was leased for 8 to 10 years. Was a really good Bermuda farm. As Kenny talked about, they wasn't putting 45 pounds of potash back for each ton of hay. Potash was calling for 200 to 300 pounds of actual K2O per acre. A lot of sagegrass coming in there. But this particular picture is Pastora, 1.5 ounce, 6 ounces of Roundup per acre rate. And you can kind of see right down the middle where the sagegrass is not as prolific. I don't know how good you can see this, but this is a spot where we sprayed 1.5 ounces of Pastora, 6 ounces of Roundup on September 4th, and this was 3 weeks later. I don't know if you can see on the left-hand side, the sagegrass is already knee-high or better in 3 weeks, and you can see the Bermuda on the right side. Another reason for doing this in September, you hear chemical injury to Bermuda, reducing maybe 30 days of growth or one hay cutting. Doing it September 4th, they cut it the last time. We went in and sprayed after. We did this a year ago, September 4th, on this particular field, and there was no issue with the Bermuda greening up in the spring, and it looked just like this in the spring. I don't know if you can see the white tire tracks from the side by side. We rolled over that with the tires, just like the Greenbrier demonstration, where those tires ran. It killed the sagegrass, crabgrass, foxtail dead really quick. So my thinking is we cut that Bermuda the last time, get a rain within a week or 10 days, go in there and roll it, and we can take care of, like I say, foxtail, crabgrass, sagegrass. Some of those grasses it's hard to kill out of Bermuda in season without losing production. So this is that same Pastora Roundup mix in Johnson grass. Again, I think you can see the tire tracks. I know we've got ways with the Outrider that we can control Johnson grass in season in Bermuda. But since we had some Pastora and Roundup left over, we made a pass through there. This was a field of solid Johnson grass 2 years ago, just like the one I just showed you. Look, the Johnson grass was that thick or thicker in this particular field. One shot of Outrider after the first cutting, Johnson grass was back up knee high. One shot. The second year we went back in and spot sprayed Johnson grass, and this is the results at the end of the second year. I don't know how many of y'all have Johnson grass, but in the last 5 months, I've probably screened 400 to 500 samples for nitrates. And if you can have Bermuda that's like this, why would you not spray Outrider and eliminate that problem? I promise you in the next 6 months in Randolph County, we're going to have dead cattle due to nitrates because not everybody got it screened. Promise you we'll have several head that will not make it through the winter due to nitrates. And not only that, if you've got pregnant cows and that nitrate is mid-level, it can cause cows to abort, and there'll be a lot of cows sold next spring because they're not pregnant, didn't calve, because the nitrates were at that level that maybe caused them to abort. So you have 5 or 6 cows abort due to high nitrates at calf prices right now. How much Outrider can you buy for 5 or 6 calves? So, here's a little spray demo I did, kind of a fence row. I wanted to show these. I know you can't see it but where I sprayed, this is Grazon at 2%, 20 gallons per acre. So that's about 48 ounces of Grazon per acre. Blackberries, sprouts, Cerisa lespedeza, all controlled. This is Grazon next, 2%. So it'd be 48 ounces per acre. This is Grazon and Remedy, 2% Grazon, 0.5% Remedy. I've sprayed quite a few thorns, oaks, hickory, blackberry, and I've used as much as 1% Remedy, but I don't seem to get as good control with the 1% Remedy, so I back it off. I think the Remedy at 1% burns the leaves too quick, and you don't get the Grazon and Remedy down to the roots. So you might try the 0.5% if you're doing some brush work or fence row work. I just think it works a lot better, and we get a lot better, slower control, but better control. This is Grazon next in Remedy. Pretty good shot. For fence row, I went ahead and added the Roundup at 2% to the Grazon and Remedy in case you wanted to take out everything. Works really good. Grazon next, Remedy and Roundup, super good, just like the rest of them. This is Patriot. Again, 1 ounce per acre rate. Took out blackberry, sprouts, Cerisa lespedeza, and it's working pretty good on the greenbrier. And a lot of times I get questions on, well, should I go ahead and spray it or not? Late in the year, kind of got hay caught up. This was all sprayed August 20th. And this was 3 weeks after I sprayed. We hadn't had any rain in 3.5 weeks. And it still did a really good job. I kind of wanted to see what it would do in a dry condition. Back feeding. Anybody have trouble with Dallas grass in Bermuda? Anybody have trouble with Dallas grass killing cows this year? We had 3 or 4 farms that lost cattle due to Dallas grass. This is in a Bermuda field. We sprayed it due to cutting Bermuda kind of late, since we did get some rains about 3 or 4 weeks ago, maybe 5. Got enough Bermuda, they went in and cut it. And our temperatures were still pretty warm. And Dr. Boyd always says spray the Dallas grass while it's still green and the Bermuda is gone dormant. Yesterday I looked at Bermuda, and we've got Bermuda that tall, just lush and green like it was May, June. So there's about a 4 or 5 day window that you can apply Roundup to the Dallas grass before it goes dormant after the Bermuda does. So I was looking, usually up there it's the wind's blowing or it's raining or something that's muddy, and we can't hit that 5 day window or week window. So in one of those other plots where I put the Pastora and Roundup, had some Dallas grass in it, and it seemed to do a pretty decent job. So we sprayed this. It will be 2 weeks ago today, and I took this picture Monday, and I know it's hard to see on the screen, but that Dallas grass is purpling up. The little seed heads that were sticking up, they've already dried up within 10 days. So I'm hoping that that will be a solution for us to get rid of the Dallas grass. Can you see those stripes, light colored stripes down through there? What is that? It's where the tractor tires ran. The Dallas grass, crabgrass, foxtail is dead where the tractor tires ran. Just like in the greenbriers, I think we should have rolled this before we sprayed it. Because in 10 days, the crabgrass, foxtail, Dallas grass is already dead. So I think we should have rolled the whole field and get a lot better control. Jonathan, I'm finished. If there's any questions.
All right. Thank you so much, Mike. We got a question coming from Stan Gardner.
Mike, on that Outrider, I've never used it before, but I've bought some. I'm going to try it next year on my Johnson grass. I bought a four-wheeler sprayer where I can go around and where you just got to patch the size of that podium you're standing behind, where I can just wand spray it. It will also has a boom. But anyhow, on the wand sprayer, what kind of percentage do I need to have that solution when I'm going to basically spray the wet with a wand?
How big's your spray tank?
26 gallon.
I would probably put an ounce of Outrider in that 26 gallon. If you look at the Outrider label, if you look in our MP44, it says 1.33 ounces per acre. That's pretty stiff. Pretty good amount of money. If you read through that label, get back to the fescue section. It says use 3/4 of an ounce to control Johnson grass and fescue. I really can't tell you if you're in Bermuda to use 0.75 ounces because it says 1.33 in our MP44. But I do know that if it will kill Johnson grass in fescue at 3/4 of an ounce, I don't think it knows that you're spraying it in Bermuda at 3/4 of an ounce. I've had really good luck going 3/4 of an ounce across the board per acre. And I try to use 15 to 18, maybe 20 gallons of water. So 1 ounce in a 20 gallon, I think will give you excellent controls. The one thing I would say, if you're going to broadcast spray Johnson grass, it's pretty thick in the field. Cut it first, and then come back and spray it before you do the second cutting. That gives an opportunity for any seed that may germinate to come up and you can control it. If you spray it real early, you're going to be disappointed because there's going to be a lot of seed come up that second cutting. So cut your Bermuda or whatever grass, warm season grass you got. Cut it the first time, come back when that Johnson grass gets about knee high and hit it then. And hopefully you'll get a lot of those little seedlings controlled also.
Thank you.
All right. In the interest of time, because we're trying to keep on schedule, we're going to transition over to our next speaker, Lance Blythe. Thank you again, Mike, for speaking for us. Lance is coming to us today to talk a little bit about Grassland observations and considerations. Again, to kind of hit on Lance's biography right quick, Lance started his extension career in Jackson and then Stone counties. He briefly moved over to vocational agriculture in Jonesboro, was a farm director at ASU Jonesboro, and then came back to an extension in Greene County where he is today as staff chair. He holds his BS and MS from A-State, and he and his wife have two sons, Jonathan and Matthew. So thank you so much for your time, Lance, and take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Kubish. Mike, did he say 37 years you've been in extension? Is that right? Wow, we're getting old, brother. Guys, I'm just going to jump right in here. I told Dr. Kubish I'd get us back on time, so we're going to roll. So what we're going to cover, we're going to talk about Grassland and Dazaflam as active ingredient. A little history on it, the purpose of the reason we did the study at the county level, quickly the design, the results from the study, and a summary. So a little history. Grassland was received approval from EPA in July of 2020. Dr. Boyd was here at that time and conducted some small and large plot work in 17 and 18 prior to its release. The focus he had, of course, was on pre-emergent grass control and to look at crop tolerance for this product, new product. They found excellent control in those plots of crabgrass and ryegrass. And in his notes that he shared with all of us, he said, make sure that you use some kind of foam marker, GPS guidance system or something so that you don't have over application where you get damage to your crop or streaks in your field. Local observations in 21, we were pleased to see clean fields because we had some producers in the county that jumped on it as soon as it came out and put it out in the fall of 2020, and we were all really pleased to see this new product and how well it worked. 2022, same thing, saw some really good control. However, we also noticed that the Bermuda grass seemed to have a bit of a delayed green up. There were some bare spots in the field, and there were areas that the grass just seemed weaker and thinner. Later in 22 growing season, we're also seeing areas that seem not to fill in where weeds were controlled. We also noted that with the stolons, they weren't wanting to root down and put down new roots at those joints in those areas where the weeds had been wiped out. In 2023, again, excellent weed control. However, we also saw some major damage in some very large areas in some fields. Tifton 44, the old Midland, these are winter hardy varieties. So a lot of uproar in our county, like what the heck's going on? Well, if y'all can remember back that far, we had a pretty tough winter. We had a lot of damage in lawns. And this was statewide, y'all. We had a lot of damage going on. So we kind of wanted to see and try to figure out what role this product may or may not have had in some of the damage we were seeing. So anyway, this is an example right here. You can see this was in July of 23. We saw this in multiple places around the county. This is a picture of that field. This is Tifton 44, and it pretty much wiped it out. And I'm not saying it, as in Dazaflam did. I think it was just part of the perfect storm, if you will. This was a low area in the field. So there's two things that are going on. Where does cold air go? It goes down, and then also had quite a bit of moisture, and you're going to see anywhere that water stands, this product seems to work really well. again, observations in 23, we also had an on-farm trial, and this was whole field trial where we had used Resolon, and it was in Cheyenne 2, which is a seeded variety of Bermuda grass. We noted excellent weed control again, but seemed to have reduced plant vigor. This field had been established for 10 or 12 years, excellent hay field, but you could see it just wasn't itself, if you will. It was really weak, just didn't produce tonnage like it had in the past. So that's when we decided we needed to try this and try to find some areas around the county. Producers lined up, said, hey, come to it on my place. We got to learn something here. And if you remember, this about the same time, wasn't long, Dr. Boyd had just retired. So we didn't have any state level work going on anymore. So we just decided to do something at the local level. So we did. We put out 4 plots, 16 treatments, Tifton 44, Old Midland. We had some bonds where we put one of these out, and then also in Laredo Bermuda grass, which is a seeded variety. So these are the treatments. I don't want to get in the weeds with this, but basically what we did was we went with the label rate, 3 ounces. What if you were putting it out in the fall and you overlapped? Or what if you went over a spot twice where you're turning around at the end of the field? So we would use a 3 ounce rate. We would use a 6 ounce rate. What if you were putting out 5 ounces in the fall? Well, what if you overlapped with that? So these are just examples, the ones in orange or red there, of where a rate got doubled accidentally. You know, you didn't have a GPS, you didn't have markers, and you just messed up. So we put out fall only treatments. We put out fall and late winter spring treatments. And then we also have plots that were just late winter, early spring treatments. So this is the Laredo Bermuda grass. This was in September. This is when we started. This is one of them. So anyway, 16 treatments, and just notice how good that grass looked when we started. Results year 1, we noticed slight increase to late green up with those late winter, early spring treatments versus fall treatments. We didn't see quite as much of a delay. It was obviously more evident, some of the negative effects in the seeded varieties versus the other ones. Anywhere you went where the off-label rates, if you will, were put out, examples of where you overlap, we saw more negative effects. And we did note some dead Bermuda grass in spots where water would stand in the winter. So keep that in mind. This is just a picture. This is in Midland. This is just a picture of showing you that the product can move with a lot of rainfall. It talks about this on the label, but this is an example of where water stood in the wintertime in this low area, in this slope ground, and that Bermuda grass didn't really recover all year, where that product that we had applied had moved down into the field. So that was about all we saw in year 1. Year 2, we started seeing increased areas of bare ground, thinning stands, again, most evident in those seeded varieties. There was delayed green up. It increased. It was more evident, again, in seeded varieties. Notable increase in this delay in these off-label rates. Higher rates showed obvious product movement on any ground that was sloped. It was easy to see that product at a high rate moved across these other plots. It was pretty easy to see. And there was an increase in these dead spots where water stood. And if you remember, we had 14 inches of rain this year in April. Actually, that picture in the Midland, that place was under 4 feet of water back in April. Anyway, again, higher rates showed more damage. So this is that same field of Laredo Bermuda grass. The first picture you saw was from the other end looking this way, but I put this one in here to show you a couple of things. After I took this picture, I decided it was time to end this study. I did not want to damage this producer's field any worse than we had. That was solid green, thick Bermuda grass when we started the study, and look at it April this year. The white lines are showing you where these are some of the higher rate strips we put out. You can see where that product had moved down the hill across the other strips. So anyway, just know that the product can move with a lot of rainfall. So when you talk about crop tolerance, this is just what we noticed in our county. The Tifton 44 seemed to be the most tolerant. I really didn't see a lot of damage after a couple years of doing this in the Tifton. And that first picture you saw, remember the huge field area damage? That was Tifton 44. Matter of fact, the plots that we put out were right across the road from where all that dead Bermuda was. We couldn't replicate it with some crazy rates we were putting out. So it's pretty tough. Bonds is another one that withstood it pretty well. The Midland had good tolerance, except areas where there was water standing. It just didn't turn out well for the grass. Laredo showed significant damage, the picture you just saw. So we decided it's time to terminate this. We've seen all we need to see. We've learned what we needed to learn, and we'll move on. Cheyenne 2 on the whole farm trial, again, weaker, thinner stands after year 1. But the good news is at this point, that was 2 years ago, Bermuda grass has recovered and had excellent yields back to what it should or what it was in the past this year. So that's great. In summary, Resilon is an excellent pre-emerge herbicide. So it was a new product, new chemistry for forages. It works really well. In our area, we have glyphosate-resistant ryegrass, and it is an issue. It's an issue in row crops, and it's an issue in hay fields. In my opinion, it's one of the best products we have to clean that up because it works. I mean, it does an excellent job at a 3-ounce rate, in the fall around Labor Day, you're good. We found that the product application to certain seeded grass, Bermuda grass varieties, even at label rates, can cause some negative side effects. This is a picture that Dr. Russell shared with me. He's a specialist in Auburn, and this is just an example of ryegrass control in Bermuda grass. The stuff works great. That's a 3-ounce rate strip through Bermuda grass. It works really well. And we've seen this in multiple places in our county where we've used it. It works great. Continuous summary, negative effects in hybrid varieties are low in year 1. However, they do seem to increase the more you use this product. If labeled rates are exceeded, negative effects are likely to occur in both seeded varieties and hybrid varieties. These negative effects seem to increase with continued use year after year after year. And what are all these negative effects I'm talking about? Well, here they are summarized. Delayed green up is something you may deal with. Weakened thinning stands. Areas of bare ground where Bermuda grass or where indaziflam kills the weeds. Your Bermuda grass tries to run and fill in, but it doesn't because the stolons, when they try to go down and put a root down, I actually have pictures where the roots went down and hit the ground and turned sideways. They just won't penetrate and get new growth started there. And then dead Bermuda grass. Again, the pictures you saw, I don't know what role Resilon played in it, but it was part of that formula. So just keep that in mind. And lastly, this product can move from applied site to other sites when you have a lot of rainfall. It has a very long residual. The plant back in the label, there's actually 2 plant back times listed in there. 18 months in one part of the label, and then another part of the label says 22 months. So just know it's some stout stuff, and it hangs around a long time. Anywhere you have water that stands in the wintertime, you're going to have some negative effects there with this product. No application mistakes, and always read and follow the label because a lot of the stuff we talked about, it talks about in the label. There's a few things it doesn't talk about. One of them, in my opinion, I wish somebody would do some more work with is using this in different seeded varieties because it does have some pretty serious negative effects. So if you have seeded variety Bermuda grass, be careful, especially if you put it out in the spring, especially if it's areas that stay wet. So keep that in mind. And guys, that's it. I want to thank Hill Hay Farms, Gillum Hay Farms, Spear Hay Farms, Van Gilder Hay Farm, industry cooperators, Greenpoint Ag and Bear. They helped us with this. I want to thank Dr. Tommy Butts, Dr. Hannah Smith, Mr. Kenny Simon, Dr. John Boyd, and Dr. David Russell from Auburn. All these guys helped, and I want to thank the church, too, for letting us come here and do this. It's a nice facility. And thanks to Kenny for asking me to come up here and visit with you guys. And that's it.
Thanks so much, Lance. We got time for one question.
Yes, sir. I didn't mention, there's a lot more I could have mentioned, but we had 4 different soil types. And in the sandier ground, especially in seeded varieties, it was pretty rough on the Bermuda grass. So there's a lot of things to keep in mind there. Soil type, fertility. Y'all have heard about that all morning, right? So if you're in a location where your Bermuda grass is stressed, weak, or having problems already due to lack of P and K, you're not putting out enough nitrogen, these effects are going to be worse. So, yeah.